final question, prepared question, and then we will have questions from the audience. I guess there are quite a few by now. If somebody still has a question, wants to clarify something each of the candidates has said, you can still put your question in, and we'll try to use it. We're right on time as far as our schedule is concerned, and we're actually a little ahead. The final question is, if you are elected or re-elected, what would be your top priority in the Big Bear Valley? Starting with Mr. Ramos.
For the Big Bear Valley, I think really, if leaders start to work together and you create that positive image, everybody's going to benefit from that. Because then you're going to start to see a new era in San Bernardino County. And you're going to be able to market the Bear Valley area for the different things that are here. It's not just in the ski season. This is an area that's 4 seasons that tourism can come to. But also, you have to be able for jobs, making sure that jobs is a top priority. We have to make sure that people are being supportive of those, because if jobs aren't created, we're not going to be able to keep small business moving forward. When I talk about small business growth, it's not about building new buildings. It's about filling the vacant ones that are here now. We need to make sure that we're moving things forward in a positive area, and certainly public safety remains a top priority here in the mountaintop. When you start to see a court system that's closed down to 1 day a week in the beginning of the month, then there's some issues. There's some issues as far as will law enforcement be able to and feel comfortable about issuing those citations, because they're going to have to drive down the hill, right, in order to show up at court. There's issues that need to be addressed, and public safety is a big one. And it all comes down to the community and what's going on here, and people engaged, understanding that there's only 1 day a week that the court is open. Right? Just 1 day, and that's a disservice to the community. We have to be able to be engaged in those, speak up for that, and make sure that funding comes this way.
Mr. Bagley?
Well, you're asking me for one priority for the entire Bear Valley. That's hard to quantify. I have to tell you, as a newly elected supervisor, my first priority would be up here to be engaged with elected officials, civic organizations, to hear from you. I've heard some criticisms throughout the valley. There's some sensitivity about a lack of representation down the hill. I believe it would be my role to be your advocate. That would be my #1 priority to come up here. Tourism is a major part of your economy. I need to hear from you. It's not just my vision. It's what you have to tell me that I need to represent in San Bernardino.
Larry?
Well, let's look at economic development. There are 2 real strengths in the Big Bear Valley. One of those is construction and the trades, which is decimated by the local economy. The other is tourism. Tourism really is where we can focus and have been focusing. And we need to make sure that the revenues from the county that have come up here to enhance the tourism trade, to your chambers of commerce, the Resort Association, continue to flow in this valley. Without strong representation of the Board of Supervisors and somebody who's willing to take a punch, you're going to lose those funds, and we can't allow that to happen. There's been a lot of talk about jobs and job creation. Yeah, government really doesn't do a very good job of creating jobs. If we did, the funding from the federal government would have lifted all boats, and we'd be in a great economy. It obviously doesn't work that way, as we saw with the $2.1 billion in loan guarantees provided to Solyndra. They filed for bankruptcy yesterday. Those are federal funds, they're your tax dollars that need to be protected. But besides the local economy, law enforcement and public safety continues to be the greatest issue for the mountain communities. The fire issues in our mountain communities continues to be a large issue for us. We have been working with the county fire department and state and forestry services to provide greater clearance areas between our homes and our neighbors' homes and the interface of the forest. This is the most populated forest area in the country, and you all live here. You need somebody who understands those issues. My history with Southern California Edison, working with the Bark Beetle, working the last 3 fires up in your mountain communities. You know you can know that I know the issues that this mountain has when it comes to public safety and making sure that we maintain those services for you, whether it be chipping services or clearance services or just having a sheriff coming down the street. You know that I am understanding of those issues, and I'm probably the only one with direct experience with it. And I'll continue to use that on your behalf.
Okay. Now we'll start with the questions that have come from the audience. They may not be stated exactly the way they were written, but we're trying to give you the gist of the question. And the first one, which we will start with Mr. Agley, is about the loss of redevelopment funds and where those funds went and what could be done to restore the funds.
Having been involved with redevelopment in my own local community, I understand what a viable, effective tool that can be. I also understand how much it can be abused. There are terrible examples throughout the state of California where redevelopment has been abused. But I do believe it's always better to have the option of making local decisions for planning, including redevelopment. To have that money leave this community and go back as discretionary spending somewhere else to balance the state budget is absolutely wrong. Redevelopment, I hope, will come back in some format in the future. It allows for communities to look at areas that are blighted and go in with tax increment to fix them. It doesn't always work smoothly. The government that's closest to the people is the best form of government to have. Redevelopment is one of those tools.
Mr. Derrick?
Certainly. I don't think you can expect redevelopment funds to come back in any way, shape, or form anytime in the future. The governor's made his position very clear. He thinks that they're a waste of money, that it's a pig in a poke. So we do not expect redevelopment funds to come back or those opportunities to come back to us under this governorship. With that said, there have been a lot of problems with redevelopment. The former Norton Air Force Base is a perfect example. The Inland Valley Development Agency has now spent over $200 million preparing that facility for commercial passenger service that we're never going to see. And I stated it back in '07, it's the truth today. There are no airlines coming to San Bernardino. And it's only because some of my colleagues in the past who served on those boards failed to look at the real market, failed to look at what was happening in the airline industry, and they wasted $200 million. We have a beautiful facility. It's completely empty. We need to focus on general aviation and look at where the county can spend dollars responsibly without blowing it, because it is your dollars. Those are your funds that you're responsible for. The other thing I think that we need to acknowledge about redevelopment is it has done some good things. There are projects out there that would never have been created, particularly senior housing projects that the Big Bear Valley desperately needs, and we've been working with local governments here to provide those type of services. That 20% set aside for redevelopment that's for low-income housing, I think should be focused on senior housing and providing care for all of us who someday I hope to reach 80. I hope I won't need it, but maybe someday I will. And we need those type of projects in our community. So I think that's a big loss. I think that may come back through Sacramento, but the governor's even stated he's not interested in that at this time. So unless he has a change of heart, I don't expect to see redevelopment funds return to San Bernardino County.
Mr. Ramos?
Yeah, certainly here, the RDA, it's more called an improvement agency up in the Big Bear Valley. But there's different processes as far as when that dismantling started to take place. There's a successor agency that has to be put into place, and then there's an oversight board committee that's put together to make sure that those projects that were actually moving forward before this legislation went forward, before it changed, that there's funding to complete those projects. And it's the oversight boards that actually have come together in the jurisdictions within the area itself, an improvement agency, that has to come together and put together an obligation plan. That plan goes to the controller of San Bernardino County. And the controller looks at the money that would have came to the RDA, would it still be intact, and starts to put that money away into a trust fund for this improvement agency here in the Big Bear Valley, so that those projects will get completed. That special trust fund has to be created and the obligation plan put into effect by July 2012. Now, as far as that money that would have been coming through the RDA and the improvement agency to the area, we have to make sure that if they're able to calculate the money to fulfill the obligation for those projects, then they're able to allocate and calculate the money that should have been coming to the area. And we need to be able to fight and champion those issues to make sure that money comes back to the local area. This is an issue that's unraveling and evolving as we speak. But we know that if they can calculate that money to make sure those obligations are fulfilled, then they have a way to actually calculate what money should be coming back to the area, and we need to fight for that.
Okay. The next question is, what do you think about the future of the Moon Ridge Animal Park? And we'll start that with Mr. Derrick.
You faded out. Well, this isn't a 2-minute question. Well, let's face it, back when I took office, the county was working with the Forestry Service on negotiating a lease on the North Shore. That lease got down to a 15-year, cancel on a year's notice lease with severe limitations. The site itself had $4 million in improvements that had to go in, and we had a budget of $8 million. So I told Reese Troublefield, pull the plug on it. I know it upset a lot of people here in the valley. Pull the plug on it. The site may look great, but financially it doesn't work. I told him, go look for property, both he and the curator of the zoo, Deborah, and find a piece of property that we can purchase that comes within budget so that we can build this facility finally after 50 years of leasing property. And we did. We found the new location, which you're all familiar with, right near the existing Moon Ridge facility, where the street splits and you got that triangular piece of property. We bought it for $2.1 million. It already has utilities, it has most of the infrastructure nearby. It's not going to cost a lot of money to develop. We can develop it into a zoo with the remainder of our budget. But we're also hopeful that we're going to be able to bring a nonprofit on board to help us raise the other $27 million we need to make it a really shining facility for our community. I'm proud to be working with the city of Big Bear Lake on this project. They're partners in this, and they have been partners. I want to thank you, the members of the council here today, for their help on this. This is going to be a great facility for the county when it's done. It will be 4 times the existing site. And we will own it. We will never be kicked off. The lease will never expire. We will never, and if we need to look at expansion, there's opportunities for expansion 20 years down in the future too. We expect revenues in this facility to triple when it's built. It already makes money for the county, and with that tripling of revenue, we also think it'll be a destination where people from all over Southern California, and hopefully internationally, will come and visit our animals. It's a great facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ramos?
Yeah, the zoo has been a topic of debate, first over by the Discovery Center, and then now in the area where it is right below the golf course. I think if that's what the community wants, I think it's a great idea. I think it's something that could draw people to the valley to share in the tourism dollars. Anything that would help to stimulate the economy should be looked at and supported. The Moon Ridge Zoo, where it's at right now, there has to be areas to grow. I think if people want it in the area where they're talking about, then it should be. And we should get behind and support it. If that's what the people in the community so desires, then that's what it should be. I mean, we should be able to use it again, not just the ski lifts, but you're able now to use a zoo, a high-altitude zoo, to draw people to the community that would start to spend dollars and boost the economy. It's something that could be amplified and supported.
Bagley?
No, I love the view. It's been the zoo. It's been a pleasure bringing children there over the years and visiting it. I'm a little troubled by the price tag that you see there right now, but as County Board of Supervisors, I do believe it's a really valuable asset to this area, and I would be engaged in finding a long-term solution for it.
The next question from the audience is one that I don't really understand, but maybe you do. Would you approve a rehab facility to come to Big Bear like the one in Arrowhead? Starting with Mr. Bagley.
Well, I have to say I'm not familiar with the rehab facility in Arrowhead, and siting rehab facilities are always difficult community issues. It goes through the planning process. You can imagine it's a change in a neighborhood, and I do believe that's a public hearing process that has to take place. And without having expertise on that particular rehab, it's out of my lane to postulate on it, other than to tell you I am sensitive to the needs of members who live in the community when such a facility is opened up.
Mr. Derry.
Thank you. This is an issue that I've been working on since about 1995 when I was working in the legislature. When my boss at the time, Fred Aguirre, carried a bill that would require local approval for rehab facilities with persons with six or fewer living in the residence. The problem right now is that the state of California, under the law, you can buy a residence as a rehab facility as long as you only put 6 people in it. There is no legal permitting allowed by the local control agency, the city or the county. They can open it anywhere they want under state law. Now, I tried to change the law when I worked in Sacramento. we failed miserably. I hate to say it, but the legislature up there loves these things. Otherwise, they change the law and give us some local approval authority. That's not happening. Only facilities that house 7 or more can be regulated by the county or by local governments. So that's the problem Lake Arrowhead has. They purchased a bunch of homes up there in the Lake Arrowhead area, only put 6 people into them, and it basically eliminates our ability to regulate them. And they're popping up all over the community there in Lake Arrowhead. I'm hopeful we can avoid it. Maybe they'll just figure Lake Arrowhead's close to San Bernardino and leave us alone. I can't guarantee that. I guarantee you there are some facilities in your community right now you may not know about, and they're not required to tell us. So we don't know until you find out as local communities and issue a complaint to us. That's the issue. It's really Sacramento and the inability of the folks in Sacramento to understand local control and the needs for us to protect our neighborhoods and our communities.
Mr. Ramos?
I think it really goes back to one of the questions that was asked earlier as far as addressing the special needs of the community. If the community really needs those types of rehab centers, then it would benefit those that need those resources. And we talked about how if people need resources, why should they have to travel down the hill? I mean, it's not just right now the different images that we see as far as people out of work. There's blue-collar people out of work that need these types of services. So it comes back to the community. I understand that there was some debate over Section 8 housing, that all these different things were running around and running rapid. But it's been there, and some of these things haven't come to fruition. It comes back to the community. We're in a recession where job growth isn't there. People are starting to fall into certain areas, but that doesn't mean that we can't be there to help and support them. I think we actually have to make sure that people, if they want to change their lives around, we give them that opportunity. Because who knows where they're going to succeed in life? Who knows where they're going to go? It comes back to what the community needs and addressing those special needs. And it really is at the local level, those needs that are there. So it comes back. Now I understand the 6-bed and 7-bed, but if you're a parent, you have somebody engaged in that type of activity, you're going to go out there and get all the services you need to make sure they can succeed. It shouldn't be any different up here trying to get those resources on the mountaintop.
Mr. Bagley?
You've already got it. You started off.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have no rebuttal.
Okay, who has an answer? Okay, here's a question that has to do with special districts and requirements that they have to meet versus those that are imposed or those that are on private developers, eliminate the code. So, should county special districts be required to follow the same requirements as private developers, I guess is the gist of the question. And let's start with Mr. Bagley.
I have to tell you, I'm not sure that I understand the question, but if you were talking about expanding services for a special district, should the special district be held to the standards of the county development code? That certainly that is appropriate. And I have to apologize, I'm not sure exactly where that question is going.
Well, I think it infers or gives the impression that county special districts do not have to follow as rigid requirements as private developers. Anybody have any insight on that?
I'm confused because I don't think special districts builds any houses or anything like that to be effective.
Special districts, the pipes in the ground, they build the public works facilities. I don't know that they would be exempt from normal building and safety standards.
So they would have to follow CEQA?
They do.
That kind of thing.
And they do have to follow CEQA and other laws of that nature, yes.
Anybody else have anything? This is one about representation on Barwa, and there is someone who feels that they have not had adequate representation in Fawnskin. And I assume that this is a county appointment that they're talking about to come to Fawnskin?
Yes, it is. And and I have basically decided with recommendation of county council to appoint myself, so you can hold me accountable. And my backup is Jeff Rigney from Special Districts. He's and has great understanding of the issues involved. There are discrepancies in the price tag between services in different areas of houses. Those exist. A lot of those discrepancies exist because of cost of service. The more pipe you have to put down to get to a certain home, the more cost is involved in putting the pipe in the ground. And that cost of service has to be included in the actual cost of the water or other service that's provided. That's reasonable and fair. Now, I'm not saying that it's completely reasonable and fair. I think we need to look at it again and take another look at it. I think there needs to be more openness in all levels of government. But I'm willing to work with Barbara and the folks there and the folks at Fonskill to make that happen. This has been a long fight that's existed long before I was elected. And I'm not going to guarantee there's a cure to it. But it's something we need to look at and be fair and open about and how we do it.
Would either of you have a policy that would ensure that areas like this would be properly represented on various agencies and bodies and that kind of thing?
Well, I have to tell you, as a county board supervisor, if I were making appointments to agencies for people to represent the community on my behalf, I come from an old school that says you interview local people and you ask for qualified candidates and you get feedback from the community. It's not about me making a choice, it's about getting feedback from you and getting reasonable representatives to represent you. That would be my policy as a county board supervisor.
Mr. Ramos?
Yeah, I think first off, you would actually have to get knowledgeable people that truly understand how these things are working with special districts. I understand 53B in Fonskin, within that special district, you would appoint people that truly understand. Right now, within that area, the EDU is about twice the amount of counterparts within the valley, in Big Bear Valley. And if that means putting somebody in there that could actually understand, so that that fee isn't twice as much as the counterparts in the Big Bear Valley, we need to start putting people together to address that. And why is it twice as much as others, when it's only about 4% of the flow for these different sewer treatment plants? I mean, you got to look at some of these things. Get knowledgeable people. It's not about appointing yourself or appointing others. Appointing knowledgeable people that are engaged in the community that can bring solutions to some of these problems.
This one is a little far afield, but I am going to ask a question that I think gives the gist of what the question was. And basically, what I am asking of you is whether you see any role of Board of Supervisors in the issue of immigration, either legal or illegal. And do we have somebody who wants to hop in on that? Mr. Derrick?
Yes, the board does. When we direct policy related to our Sheriff's Department, the Sheriff's Department does, when a person who's driving without a license, confiscate that vehicle. Many times it is a person who's not documented illegally. Those are just facts. I think the board can also do things to ensure that jobs go to residents of this county first, before they're given to somebody else who's not here legally. It's a huge problem in this county. It's a huge problem in the state of California. One of the reasons we have a budget deficit in the state of California is because we provide a lot of services to people who aren't here legally. Now that's not trying to be harsh or cruel or anything else. That's just a fact. And the fact that the federal government is not doing its job in enforcing immigration rules and laws. The fact that the state of California now is trying to prohibit counties from even taking vehicle or confiscating vehicles from people who don't have licenses, I think, is a shame, and it's a step backwards. We do have significant issues in this valley. We have significant issues throughout the county that need to be addressed, and I think the board does have a very small but a role in immigration service, in helping the state enforce its own immigration laws.
No, well, certainly it's an issue that's being debated. It's a federal issue. Certainly the county has to follow the law. I think that with law enforcement, those that are breaking the law, those that aren't here legally, should be arrested and held accountable. But we also have to look at the business areas and the laws that are already in place, the laws that are there from the state and the federal government. Follow those laws. We have to make sure that those that are being hired are actually people and people from the community. I think this isn't a topic that the county board is going to actually adopt and move federal legislation. This is a bigger issue. But the county has to follow the laws and rules just like everybody else. And that means that if people are creating criminal activity and they're not here legally, then they should be arrested and deported. But those that are actually in the business sector, you check those different social security numbers, you check that criteria. It's a state law. You follow that. And so I'm not so sure anything else that the county can do than follow those laws and implement things in those areas.
Well, I'm always concerned when local governments start posturing on political issues beyond their scope of regulation. I believe that when people come to the United States, they come here for the American dream. My relatives came as immigrants at one time. But I do believe that you should do that legally. And part of the role of San Bernardino County is law enforcement, and that would be the role of the County Board of Supervisors, to make sure that the laws of the United States, as they apply in the County of San Bernardino, are enforced.
The final question before we get to closing statements, we're right on time, I think. This is kind of a sticky subject, but it raises its head every now and then, and I believe Supervisor Rutherford has an ethics working group that she's working on some kind of ethics policy to present to the Board of Supervisors. So what would be your thoughts on what makes an effective ethics policy for county supervisors and probably for county employees as well?